It's the same great analysis that you've become accustomed to here from the Fantasy Headliners, but this season we got a brand new layout and a more in-depth experience that's going to help you try to figure out exactly what your lineup should look like any given week. Welcome to our enhanced start and sit shows for 2025, and we're going to kick things off with wide receivers. Our start and sit shows this year will have several segments dedicated to going in depth on certain players and finding who will be the best options for your team any given week. We'll kick it off with all the must-start players, guys that are going to be in your lineup no matter what. What about the landmines? Who are some guys that could end up blowing up your lineup any given week? What about the guys that could go nuclear? Maybe they're not a must-start players, but they've got some insanely high ceiling this week. And then we'll wrap things up with the toughest calls. Who will be the guys that are the toughest players to pick on any given week? And yes, we have brought back official start and sit designations for 2025. And by the way, to end each episode, we have our brand new confidence scoring system. That is an algorithm that we created here at the Fantasy Headliners that will help us find players with the best floor and the most consistent potential every single week. Do you need to start somebody that's going to give you a super safe floor? Do you need to shoot for somebody that has higher upside but is way riskier? Our confidence scoring system is unlike anything else that you'll find out there right now. Whether you're new to the Fantasy Headliners or you're returning for another season, I highly encourage you to watch this entire episode so you can get a feel for how the layout will be this year and the information that will be provided. Don't have enough time? You always can pause and come back later, but hit that button down below, speed it up to 1.5 or even 2 times, and fly through all the same information just a little quicker. And since it is week 1, we're going to be talking about way more players this week than we probably will any other week. I've got almost 80 wide receivers that we're going to discuss today, but that's the way it is with week 1 because there's so many things that have yet to play out. We need to make sure we're covering as many as possible. And in week 1, I've got 23 must-start wide receivers. If you own these guys, they need to be in your lineup for one reason or another. And we're not going to touch base on every single one of them because they're must-start for a reason. But for a majority of these guys, based on a lot of things like draft capital, potential, and other pieces of information, you're going to have them in your lineup. Like starting with Marvin Harrison Jr. He's clearly going to be the number 1 or number 2 target in any given week, right there with Trey McBride. And we know that we have enhanced his body the same way we've enhanced our start and sit shows here. He absolutely is a guy that has put on a few pounds to add some weight, to add some muscle, to be able to compete a little bit better with those stronger cornerbacks. We're excited to see what he can do this season, and you're going to be starting him this week because he's probably your wide receiver 2 at worst. Drake London for Atlanta, I've talked about his top 5 potential all off season long. Jamar Chase was the number 1 pick in a majority of leagues. T. Higgins right there along with Jamar Chase in week 1 going up against Cleveland. T. Higgins has got touchdown potential every single week. He's definitely a guy that could end up dropping down to nuclear or landmine at some point in time, but as of right now, we're going to go ahead and start him. He was definitely right on the cusp of being drafted as a wide receiver 1. CeeDee Lamb, now that they've traded Micah Parsons, who knows how that defense is going to operate this year. They could be giving up 30, 35 points a game, and Dallas is going to have to throw the ball a ton to keep up. CeeDee Lamb may be the wide receiver 2 now behind Jamar Chase. Courtland Sutton, I've been hypercritical of him this offseason. You all know it, and you all have heard it and either agreed or disagreed adamantly. But for Courtland Sutton, we're definitely still going to start him in week 1. Don't get funny with him. Amon-Ra St. from Detroit, he's got top 12 potential every time he steps on the field. I really don't think that he's going to be bothered by the change in OC as much as some people think. Nico Collins for Houston, really the only issue that Nico Collins has is staying healthy. Brian Thomas Jr. for Jacksonville. We've yet to see exactly how Travis Hunter will fit into the game plan. What if he only plays 30% of the offensive snaps this week? Brian Thomas Jr. could eat against Carolina. Xavier Worthy, he's got top 12 potential upside in any given week with no Rashee Rice. But there's definitely going to be more competition for targets this year than there was last year when Xavier Worthy started to play a whole lot better. I wouldn't get super excited because his floor could still be a little bit lower than what a lot of these other must-starts have. But for week 1, with no Rashee Rice, going up against the Chargers, I definitely think he's in your lineup. Ladd McConkey should still get a ton of targets, even with Keenan Allen, but we will keep an eye on him after week 1 to see if he goes from must-start to a different category. Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams for the LA Rams. It sounds like Matthew Stafford's going to be starting, but it doesn't sound like they're 100% confident that his back is fully healthy. If we have Matthew Stafford, both of these guys are going to be must-starts for us every single week. We'll see how healthy Stafford is this week, and if his time off during the preseason leaves him a little rusty. Tyreek Hill, obviously we're going to be starting him. If he has Tua, he's got top 12 potential, and he's got Tua for right now. We should enjoy it while we have it. Justin Jefferson, I mean, he's performed great with worse quarterbacks than J.J. McCarthy. I've got no problems, especially going up against Chicago. He should end up being just fine. Malik Neighbors from the New York Giants. He's been banged up this offseason. I'm still starting him. He was a first-round pick for many. How many times are we sitting our first-round pick in week 1? For the New York Jets, Garrett Wilson is the main target. I expect to see plenty of targets coming his way in week 1. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith going up against Dallas. I already said it. Dallas could give up a ton of points. You know who's going to be on the other side of those? A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Jackson Smith-Njigba, he takes over as the wide receiver 1 in Seattle. And I think there's still going to be some things that we need to see for that to play out. But I have to imagine going up against San Francisco, he'll still be the number 1 target this week. And while he might end up getting 10 targets, I do think his floor is maybe a little bit lower than what we saw in the back half of 2024. Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel with Jaden Daniels, these guys are definitely must-starts, especially against the New York Giants to begin the season. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to the landmine section. And these are the guys that, if you start them, they could end up disappointing you. Now, they're not necessarily sits. These guys could still be starts. Some of them could still be sits. But these are the guys where I just have some concerns. And while I think they could end up being good this week, I also think that their floor could be a little bit lower than what we would like. Starting off with Darnell Mooney. Now, there's still no guarantee that he's even going to play this week. So as of now, he is a landmine because if he does play going up against Tampa, it might be a decent matchup for him, but he may not end up playing nearly as much as we like. 2 receivers for Baltimore right off the bat, Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman. I'm not going to discuss DeAndre Hopkins in this week's video because I don't think we need to right now. Rashad Bateman could be a landmine because honestly, he's got some big play potential and he could score a touchdown from anywhere, but we really don't know how the target distribution is going to look to begin the season with the aforementioned DeAndre Hopkins in town now. And for Zay Flowers, he's a guy that I think a lot of people are going to start thinking, hey, I've got 8 to 10 targets incoming in a game against Buffalo. It's going to be a shootout, but like I just mentioned, how are the targets going to be distributed? Maybe it's Mark Andrews that's getting the majority of the red zone targets. Maybe Zay Flowers gets 8 targets this week, but unfortunately, they just don't turn into any big plays. And that's why he could end up being a landmine. Now, I will still start Zay Flowers this week because he has the potential in a matchup against Buffalo, where with Rashad Bateman in week 1, I don't want to get too fancy right now. I'd rather risk it with some other people. Xavier Leggett, he could definitely see some targets down the field, but I just don't feel comfortable with him as of this point to really get excited about putting him in my lineup for week 1. Cedric Tillman from Cleveland. I'm willing to take a shot on him this week. Going up against Cincinnati, they're going to have to throw the ball. Cleveland is not going to walk away with this game. They're not going to be able to run the ball 30 times this game. Cincinnati is looking to get off to a hot start in 2025. And Cleveland is going to be at the mercy of Joe Burrow and their wide receiver core to start things right away. Cedric Tillman may not have a great floor. We might be looking at a guy that absolutely could end up disappointing you. But with Joe Flacco at quarterback, down by 10 or more points, you're definitely going to see them air it out. Don't be shocked if they don't take a shot deep. It's Cedric Tillman 2, 3, maybe 4 times this game. And if he comes down with just 2 of them, that could be enough fantasy points to be considered a start this week. As a Detroit fan, I think Isaac Tesla could end up being a really good part of this offense. But that's from a pure football standpoint. I want to be very cautious when it comes to fantasy points for this guy and them being consistent. Could he be a solid red zone option? Absolutely. But guess who else could? Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery running the football, Sam Laporta. And even though Jameson Williams isn't really a red zone threat, he definitely could get in the mix a little bit more this season. There's just so many guys ahead of Tesla, we really can't start him right now. He's bench depth that we'll keep around if there's a potential injury, or maybe he does surprise us and he ends up scoring more often than we think. For week 1, I just can't run out there with Travis Hunter right now. Why? Well, that's because we don't even know how often he'll be on the field. What if he plays 30% of the offensive snaps? What if it's 40? What if it's 50? None of that is still good enough for me to risk him in my lineup this week when I could go other options. Hollywood Brown from Kansas City. He's going to have some big playability, and maybe they take a couple of shots at him down the field. But unless we see consistent production to start here in week 1, and maybe even week 2 or 3, it's going to be hard to list him as a start anytime soon. Adam Thielen back in Minnesota. I could see 5 or 6 targets this week going up against Chicago if it is a close game. But don't be shocked if he doesn't go to maybe Aaron Jones a little bit more often. Definitely TJ Hawkinson, of course Justin Jefferson, and they'll run the football as well. Chris Olave. I'll go ahead and list Chris Olave as a start this week. I do think that he has lots of potential to see a ton of targets. Now, how good are those targets with Spencer Rattler? That's something that is yet to be seen. He can get the ball to him. I don't have any questions about that, but what are the quality of the targets, and are they all dump-offs? Is he going to be like Wan'Dale Robinson or Demario Douglas, where he gets a ton of targets, but it's all before 10 yards, and he doesn't really break a lot of tackles or gain a lot of yards after that? Will they target him down the field a little bit more often? A lot of questions still when it comes to New Orleans, but in this matchup against Arizona, I think Chris Olave could work his way into flex consideration. Same thing for Wan'Dale Robinson going up against Washington. I'm going to list him as a start too, even though he is a landmine this week. He definitely could be a guy that you could start and you're like, hey, in a PPR or a half PPR league, he's definitely a flex option for you. But last season, that's where people got a little bit too mixed up because they would see the targets, but nothing would come from it. And it could end up being the same thing this year. If he gets 10 targets, that's great. But if he only catches 5 of them for 45 yards, is he really helping you out from a fantasy perspective? Going up against Washington and what will likely be a come-from-behind game where the New York Giants are going to have to play catch-up and throw the ball, Wan'Dale Robinson could see plenty of targets. Hopefully, they're just better targets than last year. I was very close to listing DK Metcalf as a must start this week. And he was even in that section, and I started talking about him. And then as I talked about him, I realized he wasn't a must start. He was more like a landmine. We really don't know how things are going to work in Pittsburgh yet. And he's going to get cornerback 1 coverage going up against the New York Jets with Sauce Gardner. So I don't really know what to expect in week 1. Would I start him? Yes, I would still start him, knowing that the ceiling is not nearly as high as what we would like it to be. Also, target percentage could absolutely be in his favor. He could see 65-70% of the targets for the Pittsburgh Steelers this week. But Pat Freiermuth could get targets. Jonnu Smith could get targets. Roman Wilson could get targets. Lots of guys, Calvin Austin, even Jalen Warren out of the backfield. Lots of targets that could go to lots of different places in this game. And the one thing I am a little bit worried about too is that if the New York Jets offense just doesn't function all that well, that Pittsburgh focuses on running the football, they play better defense, and this game just isn't one where they need to throw it all that often. Juwan Jennings for San Francisco, I'm not going to list him as a start this week. I know I'm going to get some questions on him, and I wanted to make sure that I addressed him, but he's basically sat out for the majority of training camp with an injury or disputing his contract, and he just returned to practice this week. I don't really see him making an impact based on that, going up against a good Seattle defense. And then for Tyler Lockett, same face, new place in Tennessee. I think he's got some potential there. This matchup against Denver is not going to be fun though, so I don't know if I'm really locking in with Tyler Lockett being a guy that I want to run with this week. If you're in a deep enough league, you might try to start him, hoping for some type of a big play, but I don't really think Tyler Lockett has set himself as the locked in stone wide receiver 2 as of yet. Before we hop into the next segment, I need to remind everybody, do you need to renew your membership for 2025? Do you want to try a membership for 2025? I would highly encourage everybody to do that now by hitting the join button down below. Exclusive content only for members of this channel can help take your fantasy football game to the next level. Wondering who you should start in the flex position? We've got our weekly flex, kicker, and defensive special team rankings only for members here on YouTube. Want to join a great community with exclusive access to our Discord channel? You can do that by becoming a member as well. And also live streams on Sundays where only you get to ask questions. Whatever you want to do with your membership, we've got 3 separate tiers that take your game to the next level. And if you really want some help, you can get exclusive access to Jake and myself with the ticketing system in Discord that allows you to ask unlimited questions. Let's go. Join the exclusive Headliner Nation today, where you get tons of access to amazing content and you get to join a community that is awesome as well. Hit that join button down below and let's take our fantasy games to the next level. Let's move on to the nuclear section as of now. And you might be asking, Kyle, what's the difference between landmines and nuclear? Well, landmine players are guys that have lower floors, but their ceiling isn't nearly that high either, where a nuclear player might have the same floor as someone in landmines, but their ceiling is way higher. Fantasy football is all about taking some risks, and with nuclear players, maybe their ceiling is enough to offset the risk of getting their floor, where a landmine player, their ceiling just isn't high enough for me to go with that risk. And just like in landmine, some of these guys are going to be starts and some of them are going to be sits. Maybe there's a couple of guys in the nuclear section that I'm okay with risking it with them because I like their situation just a little bit more than somebody else. So once again, you're going to have to tune in and go through all of the players to make sure you understand who I like and who I don't like. Like with Tet McMillan. Right now, he's a nuclear player for me. He was borderline must start. Now, I had to convince myself not to go with the rookie as a must start in week 1. I really wanted to, but I thought to myself, let's be a little bit more cautious with the analysis. Let's go nuclear in week 1, going up against Jacksonville. I mean, who else is going to get a ton of targets there? Nobody, in my opinion. Maybe the Jacksonville defense gets to them a little bit more often. Maybe Bryce Young doesn't take the step forward. So I think there are still some questions, but Tet McMillan is probably going to be in your lineup regardless. What about the Chicago Bears going up against Minnesota? Romo Dunze and DJ Moore. Both of these guys, significantly higher ceilings than a lot of their peers because this Ben Johnson offense could be a lot of fun to watch, but I think we still need to be cautious about Caleb Williams. This Minnesota defense should be really good, especially with pressure up the middle this season. And what if Caleb Williams has trouble with that pressure? DJ Moore is a start for me because I think he's more likely to see some of those easier targets than what Romo Dunze will. Will Caleb Williams have enough time to stay in the pocket and get the ball downfield to Romo Dunze? That's why I would go with DJ Moore over Odunze in week 1. Jerry Jeudy for Cleveland going up against the Cincinnati Bengals for a lot of the same reasons that I talked about with Cedric Tillman. But here's the biggest difference between the two, and while one is in nuclear and one is in landmines. Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman, to me, both have the same ceiling. I think they both have a lot of upside this week. Now, Cedric Tillman's might be a little bit lower than Jeudy because Jeudy can probably see more targets. However, Cedric Tillman, because of the target issue, has a lower floor than what Jeudy does and why he would land in landmines instead of being in here with nuclear and his counterpart, Jerry Jeudy. For George Pickens, I'll risk it with Pickens in week 1 because this Dallas offense is probably going to be throwing the ball an awful lot. Philadelphia is going to put some points up on them. Jamison Williams, he might be a nuclear player every single week. Now, maybe something changes and he goes up into the must starts, but I mean, I expect a lot of what we saw last season. He's going to have some huge games and he's going to have some games that just make you go, ugh. But going up against Green Bay in week 1, I will go with it. For Matthew Golden, on the other side of the football for Green Bay going up against the Detroit Lions, I will go ahead and list him as a start as well. I am concerned about week 1. From what I've heard, Terrion Arnold, who will likely be on Matthew Golden, has taken some massive steps. Now, maybe it's training camp and maybe it's just a whole lot of this and he hasn't taken those steps. And if he hasn't, then Matthew Golden could have a good week 1. But I expect Green Bay and Detroit to throw a whole lot of haymakers this week. Dante Thornton, for as much as I like him and for as good as he can be in the ceiling he has, I just can't go with him in week 1 right now. He's going to be a sit to start until I see a little bit more with Jakobi Meyers. Jakobi Meyers was not traded, even though he asked for it. He's still in town as of right now. We know Brock Bowers will likely be the main target. Stephon Diggs and Demario Douglas, both for New England. I like them both this week going up against Las Vegas. I think they both can have decent upside, and I will start both of them. Even though Demario Douglas may have a little bit of a better floor than what Stephon Diggs and maybe a little bit lower of a ceiling, I think the targets could be there. Rashid Shaheed for New Orleans going up against Minnesota. Now, I went back and forth on Shaheed, what I feel like was quite a bit. And I think there is a lot of potential for upside in a matchup against Arizona. But here's the problem. I don't know if Spencer Rattler can throw the ball downfield that consistently. If he does, then he's going to go from a sit to a start at some point in time and probably remain in the nuclear category. But I just can't do it in week 1. I'm going to list him as a sit. Now, to finish out the nuclear section, we have a few starts in a row. Ricky Pearsall for San Francisco going up against Seattle. Definitely could see him being the wide receiver 1. If Seattle plays right along with San Francisco or leads the game, Pearsall likely sees more than enough targets to be in your fantasy lineup. Calvin Ridley for Tennessee going up against Denver. Now, I have him listed as a start, but he's a very risky start this week. He was almost closer to a landmine for me because he's probably going to get Patrick Surtain more times than not. But I also don't know if that's guaranteed with exactly how Tennessee will end up lining up and how creative they may be with their formations. It's something I'm going to have to see, and that's why I went ahead and listed him as a start in the nuclear section. He might be closer to being a start in the landmine section. I really don't want to sit him if I don't have to, but I will tell you this, if you have better, safer options, then I might go with some better floors over Ridley this week. And then for Tampa Bay with Mike Evans and Emeka Egbuka, they're both going to be listed as starts going up against Atlanta. They definitely tried to overhaul the defensive line, maybe create some more pressure going up against Baker Mayfield. And if they can get after Mayfield, Evans and Egbuka could be a little all over the place to begin the season. But I do think Emeka Egbuka has a better floor than Mike Evans, while Mike Evans has a higher ceiling. Now we're going to move into our tough call section, and as the season goes on, you're going to start to see some more information populate on these slides to help you make a decision and for me to talk about. Some of the things that you're going to end up seeing in these sections are going to be average fantasy points for that player. What is their floor and what is their ceiling? And where does their average points fall in the middle of those? Who's their opponent, and what is their fantasy points allowed by that opponent, along with the call. All that information will start to populate once we have some games played. But for this week, we're just going to put NA. We discussed potentially putting 2024 stats, but I didn't love that because rookies obviously wouldn't have those, and I don't think it would paint a good picture for some players that we might be a little bit more interested in starting. Starting with Arizona, who's going to be the wide receiver 2? Is it Michael Wilson or is it Zay Jones? Until we know better, they're both going to be listed as sits. Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, and Josh Palmer are all tough calls for me because once again, we don't know how that offense is going to look like. Going up against Baltimore, they're probably going to have to throw the ball, but who's going to be the number 1 target? Will Khalil Shakir stay as that option? Will Dalton Kincaid take a step forward? Will Keon Coleman take a step forward? Will Josh Palmer be relied on in the deep game a little bit more often? The only guy I'll start from Buffalo right now would be Khalil Shakir because he's still the wide receiver 1 in my opinion until I see differently. Marvin Mims Jr. and Troy Franklin for the Denver Broncos. I would be willing to risk it with Marvin Mims this week if you're in a deeper league that starts 3 wide receivers. If you're only starting 2 wide receivers, I'm not going to start him as a wide receiver 2, and I am not going to flex him over a running back. But if you need some upside in a start 3 wide receiver league, going up against Tennessee, Marvin Mims could find himself with a couple of deep targets. Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs from the Green Bay Packers going up against the Detroit Lions this week. I expect Green Bay to have to throw the football. I don't think they're going to run it 30 or 35 times and potentially win this game. It's going to be a back and forth game, even though that Detroit Lions offense could start a little bit slow. Just keep in mind on that. These guys didn't play during the preseason, and over the last couple of years, they have started a little bit slower. People get freaked out. They end up being just fine. Jaden Reed is going to be a start this week for me, and while I don't think he's the wide receiver 1, and I don't think he's nearly as good as Matthew Golden is, in this type of a game where you could be throwing the ball an awful lot, Jaden Reed could be used as a mismatch in the slot against some of these cornerbacks that may not be as athletic as Jaden Reed. Jaden Higgins and Christian Kirk for the Houston Texans going up against the LA Rams. Both of these guys are going to be sits for me right now. I think Christian Kirk has some potential. I think Jaden Higgins has some potential. But I really don't know who the number 2 target is behind Nico Collins. And how effectively will they run the football against the LA Rams with Nick Chubb and company? Those are all questions that need to be answered. I could see Christian Kirk making his way to a start sooner rather than later. For the Indianapolis Colts, the only guy that I'm willing to start this week is Josh Downs. Now, he was kind of the guy to end last season. And when we start putting confidence scores in, which you'll see here at the end of the video, he had the best confidence score of any of the pass catchers from last year. And Tyler Warren is going to make a significant impact, and we'll talk about that in the tight end video. But for me, the guy with the best floor is Josh Downs. The guy with the best floor to highest ceiling ratio is still Josh Downs. Michael Pittman, to me, maybe has a little bit of a lower floor and definitely a lower ceiling. Alec Pierce and Adonai Mitchell might have significantly better ceilings, but way lower floors with Daniel Jones. And with Daniel Jones being at quarterback and so many options to throw the ball to, we really need to see how things play out in Indianapolis over the first few weeks of the year. Jacoby Myers, I already kind of mentioned it with Dante Thornton. I'm not really in on Jacoby Myers right now until we see a little bit more about how he actually fits into the game plan since he asked for a trade. Keenan Allen, both Trey Harris, both sits for right now. I got to see how good Keenan Allen looks. Does he have anything left in the tank? If he does, is he really a threat to take targets away from Ladd McConkey? And will Trey Harris be a guy that's going to have some big targets every once in a while, but not nearly enough targets to see consistent volume? Tutu Atwell for the LA Rams. I figured people would ask about him from time to time, so as of right now, I will include him, but I really don't think he's anywhere close to Devontae Adams or Puka Nacua, and I think Tyler Higbee is a more significant threat for top 3 targets than what Tutu Atwell is for that team. For Jalen Waddle, going up against Indianapolis, I'm okay with starting Jalen Waddle this week. More than likely, where you drafted him, you may have to start him as your wide receiver 2. Another guy that I would much rather start is my wide receiver 3 if you play in a 3 wide receiver league. Or if you're thinking about flexing him, I don't want to flex him if I've got a running back that I can play. And for Malik Washington, this is a guy that we could see get better and better and better. I'm trying not to get too excited about him because I loved him last year, but I think it would take an injury for him to be fantasy relevant. For Pittsburgh, I talked about it with DK Metcalf. Who's really going to get those second targets? Will it be one of the tight ends? Will it be one of the wide receivers? Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin. I could see Roman Wilson being the number 2 target on this team. Then I could see Pat Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith and Calvin Austin fighting behind him. I could see Roman Wilson being the last guy for targets. I could see Calvin Austin being the last guy for targets. We'll keep bringing their name up for right now until we get some more definitive answers and until we see some things play out. But for as of right now, they'll end up being sits for me. Cooper Kupp and Torrey Holton. I know a lot of people are excited about Torrey Holton, and his field stretching ability in Seattle could lead to some big plays in the future. I think he's way closer to being a guy like what we would see from Jameson Williams or what we've seen from Calvin Ridley over the last couple of years, where he might have a big play here or there and he might have a big week where you get super excited, but then he disappears for a couple of weeks. For Cooper Kupp, I think he's anxious to show people that he doesn't have nearly the amount of wear and tear that we think he does. And I think he also wants to show people that he's ready to go, and the Rams made a mistake by sending him over to Seattle and letting him go. So as of right now, Cooper Kupp will be a start for me in the tough call section. We'll see how things play out, but I like the potential still. The final section of every start and sit video is going to be our confidence rating system. Now, for those of you who have been around for a while, you know about my dynamic running back rating. And I developed that to help us find the upside for running backs in any given week. Well, this is the opposite of that for basically all the positions. The confidence rating system is going to help us find the floor. Who are we most confident in starting every single week that's going to give us fantasy viable points more times than not? And all of the names are going to be filtered into these tiers from elite all the way down to poor. Now, the names that you see right now are completely based on 2024 stats, but it'll give you a little bit of an idea of what you might be looking at moving into the next few weeks, where you're going to start seeing these populate with 2025 stats. Now, it is always good, just as it is with my DRBR, to not utilize just that. If you're coming to this section and just looking at it and moving from there, I wouldn't do that, because while somebody might have a good confidence rating system tier, it doesn't necessarily mean that they would be a good start that week. And that's what the rest of the video will help with. Headliner Nation, there you have it. I can guarantee you one thing right now, that these start and sit videos are going to give you the best information possible to help you make decisions on a weekly basis. If you consume the information, if you listen to the analysis, and then if you utilize it with what you feel is best for your team, I promise that by the end of the season, you are going to be extremely successful in fantasy football this year. If you've got hype points left this week, please consider using them on this video. Make this one of the most popular fantasy football videos on YouTube for week 1, especially if you're loving the new format and layout of the start and sit videos. Leave us a comment down below, let us know what you're thinking, and if you have any questions. And don't forget to think about becoming a member and also subscribe if you're new to the channel. But for now, Headliner Nation, I bid you all farewell. The Fantasy Headliners, where fantasy championships are won. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.